Hello and good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Successful Interface Management for Downstream Capital Projects webinar, brought to you in partnership with CoreWorks. My name is Carla Sharp. I'm a Senior Project Director at Petrochemical Update. It's my pleasure to be acting as host and chairman for the webinar today. There are over 400 of you signed up, which is a fantastic turnout, so thank you very much for such a great response. Just a brief bit of housekeeping from me before we begin. The webinar will last about 60 minutes and it is being recorded. We'll be sending you the full audio recordings and presentation slides within the next 7 days. With such a large group, please do submit your questions as and when you have them. We anticipate a lot of questions coming through. It will mean that Kelly and Stephen, our presenters, can cover as many as possible in the allotted time. To ask a question, simply send them through the questions box on your screen, and we'll get to them during the Q&A session after the presentations. Any questions that don't get around to being answered during the 60 minutes will be put to Kelly and Stephen after the webinar, and you'll receive the answers in due course. The primary purpose of today's webinar is to look at successful interface management for downstream capital projects from both the owner and solution provider point of view. The presenters will be covering how a recently completed oil and gas project implemented CoreWorks interface management and experienced some very significant benefits. During the presentation, you will hear the impact interface management had on the project, as well as lessons learned and best practices that you can take away for your current projects or future projects. Given the buzz around interface management, it will be covered in depth at the Downstream 2018 conference and exhibition, which Petrochemical Update are hosting on May 31st and June 1st in Galveston, Texas. CoreWorks are diamond sponsors of the meeting, and Stephen Airy will be joining Bechtel, SABIC, and Jacobs Engineering for a dedicated panel on best practices relating to project execution innovations, which will include interface management. If you're interested in attending, please visit www.downstreamevent.com, as you'll see on the screen now. Owner-operators can attend the event for free, and non-owner operators can have a special $200 discount by entering code CoreWorks when registering. If you have any questions about the meeting, you'll find my details at the bottom of the homepage. Please do get in touch, and we hope to see many of you there. Now, without further ado, allow me to introduce our interface management experts. The first of our two presenters is Stephen Airy, who is now the Director of Global Project Solutions and Consulting at CoreWorks. Stephen joined the CoreWorks team 2 years ago following an extensive career managing project information and processes on the owner side. Stephen first had his title Interface Manager over 20 years ago and on offshore and onshore oil and gas development in Scandinavia. Apologies. Integrating power infrastructure and the energy extraction and processing facilities. Moving forward, he was responsible for the development of an internet-based interface management solution similar to the CoreWorks product in 2005 to support a multi-billion-dollar facility in the Middle East. From concept to active deployment, and it was used by over 10 globally dispersed engineering contractors in the Americas, Europe, Middle East, Asia, and Australasia. Joining Stephen today is Kelly Maloney. Kelly is the Senior Product Manager for CoreWorks Interface Management Solution. With her vast and lengthy experience, she's become the face of interface management at CoreWorks. She's worked intimately alongside some of the largest EPCs and owner-operators from around the globe to implement successful interface management solutions for their projects, including the project that today's case study is based on. Word has it that Kelly and Stephen are quite busy at the moment with a lot of projects that are rolling out interface management this quarter. So we're very lucky and feel very happy to have them and that they could make it onto the webinar today. And now, nothing left for me to do but hand over to Kelly and Stephen, who will talk you through their case study. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Carla, and thanks everybody for joining us today. As Carla mentioned, my name is Kelly Maloney, and I'm a Senior Product Manager at CoreWorks. I'm here today with my colleague, Stephen Airy, and we're very pleased and really very excited to be able to share with you today a case study on a major oil and gas project that, despite some pretty significant challenges, was able to successfully deliver their project. We're going to share with you some stories and examples of how the discipline of interface management played a key role in this success. I'm going to start off by providing a brief overview of CoreWorks. We'll talk about the project, the topic of our case study today, and then I will provide a brief introduction of interface management. At that point, I'm going to hand it over to Stephen, who is going to walk us through the details of the case study and walk through how the project first recognized the need for interface management, how they went about implementing the solution, and then the journey they took in successfully executing interface management throughout the project lifecycle. So let me start with a bit of background on CoreWorks. We're a leading software company focused on project information management. The CoreWorks platform has integrated application solutions that are purpose-built to support engineering and construction projects. Using our solutions, companies improve project execution by supplying their teams with the tools they need to manage information, exchange data, and collaborate to ensure a project success. We have companies and customers all over the world. We have a fairly even split between owner-operators and contractors. The industry is predominantly oil and gas and power, with some mining and infrastructure projects as well. All right, so let's talk about the project. This was a $13 billion project located in a very remote northern location in Canada. The site was so remote, they had to build the infrastructure, the roads and the buildings in order to support development and construction of the site. Even with the challenge of such a remote location, the project was considered one of the best undeveloped long-term assets in the region. This assessment was based on product quality, the size of the resource, potential production volume, which was 194,000 barrels per day, and the mine life, which was expected to be in excess of 50 years. The complexity was high, involving both upstream and downstream, new construction, pipelines, transportation, and brownfield tie-ins that had to be managed. It was also a very long project, running 6 years from feed to operations. The project certainly was very challenging and complex. It had all the hallmark characteristics that contribute to a high-risk project. I'm sure many of you that have joined us today can relate to this and have worked on similar projects under similar conditions. This type of complexity and this type of risk is not really uncommon with today's projects. But what sets our project apart today is some of the additional challenges that they had to overcome, and specifically how they addressed those challenges using the practice of interface management. So here are some of the challenges that we're going to explore and share with you today. Looking at the list, I'm sure many of you can identify with the kind of issues and challenges that you're dealing with on your own projects. Multiple contractors, the challenge of coordination and integration, meeting deadlines, and of course dealing with the unknown unknowns, weather and environmental issues that are really outside of your direct control. But if the risk materializes, you're going to have to find a way to deal with it. Stephen's going to cover in detail how each of these risks affected the project and how the team was able to overcome these challenges using interface management. So we know that interface management helped this project stay on schedule despite some major hurdles, but some of you may be wondering, what exactly is interface management? Here we have a definition from the Construction Industry Institute, management of the communications, relationships, and deliverables among two or more interface stakeholders. So interface management is really used to mitigate interface-related risks to a project. The process is used to identify and document project interfaces, define the roles and responsibilities at each interface, and then facilitate ongoing communication between the interfacing parties regarding the technical exchange of information and timing for providing that information. It's really about connecting your various teams, and often we're talking about teams that have no contractual relationship with one another, yet they're required to communicate and collaborate and share information. Interface management will define complex scope and the dependencies between those scopes of work. And really you can look at it as, bridging the gap between your contracts or scopes of work, identifying interfaces to ensure that there's no overlap or gaps in scope, really filling in that gray area that may not necessarily be detailed or defined in the contract. When we look at interface management solutions, we want to focus on 4 key areas of opportunity that will mitigate interface-related risks. The first area is around scope delineation. This is really about identifying the gaps and overlaps in scope, You want to identify your project interfaces early on and get them included in the contract. Then as stakeholders come on board, they have a much better understanding of their role and responsibility at each interface. And this early identification and stakeholder alignment will reduce the ambiguity that can result in schedule delays. You want to have that opportunity to improve accountability by ensuring that all of your parties are living up to their commitments. One of the tactics or strategies I've seen used very well on projects is that they encourage or mandate their contractors to document and record what they need from others very early on. This gives all parties, and certainly the project team, a clear understanding of expectations, identifies workloads, and ensures that potential issues are identified early. You want to manage growth. This, of course, is very important for all projects. You want to manage change. Interfaces can introduce change in scope, and change can certainly introduce new interfaces. To manage this effectively, you have to have clear scope definition and ongoing visibility and transparency. And you do this by documenting your interfaces in a single central register and then monitoring and managing to identify potential issues and potential change. And our last area is the opportunity to reduce rework. If you're following best practices in interface management, you will get that early identification of engineering and construction clashes. Delivery teams are collaborating during engineering to ensure a consistent design, and during construction, interdependencies between field activities can be identified, both of which will minimize cost and schedule impact to your project. So proper management of interfaces is extremely important, maybe now more than ever as projects continue to grow in size and complexity, as was the case with the project that we're going to talk about today. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Stephen, and he's going to walk us through the details of this particular case study.
Thank you, Kelly. Just seeing if the technology is working and I can progress the slide forward. There we go. Okay. So as Kelly mentioned or highlighted, this was a multi-billion-dollar project over 6 years, and it was very kind of our client to share with us their journey and their experiences. And we'd like to take the opportunity today to share those with you. There's quite a lot of detail and content that was shared with us, and I recognize in 15, 20 minutes it's going to be challenging to convey all of this. So please ask questions, and we will try and answer all of those questions, either at the end of the session or afterwards. So what I'm going to do now is going to walk through some of those key challenges and highlight where interface management and CoreWorks help facilitate meeting the project objectives and mitigating project risks. So Kelly gave you a bit of a sneak peek, but let's walk through them again. This, for me, is the big elephant in the room: interfaces, whether that be owner, operator, stakeholder, fabricator, shipper, logistics, transportation, vendor, service personnel required on site, pick one. But these need to be managed, and that's the challenge that the team faces. Contractor turnover, always a high risk on any project. I'll talk through how the team dealt with that and how interface management helped. Early greenfield, brownfield operations. On any project which is remote or offshore or requires infrastructure, power, logistics, transportation before construction starts, there's a large volume of utilities, power, and other services that need to go live to support construction activities. And we'll dig into that a little bit and show you an example or a benefit that came to this project. Critical milestones, I think we've all dealt with those. And we'll talk about those from a construction impact and how the team dealt with some challenges in that space. And then as Kelly said, the unknown unknowns. Things you can prepare for, but then what happens when it materializes? Okay, so I'm going to take time to walk through each one of those. So let's start with the elephant, with the big challenge. So the client's project management team addressed this in a three-pronged approach. And I would typically call it, people, process, tools. Let's start with the people. They recognized they needed a cultural shift. They had done interface management before on other projects. The challenges they faced were they were smaller and they got away with using Excel and Outlook. They know they needed to do something different because of the scale, the complexity, and the number of moving parts. So the kind of tactics or approach they took, one team. That was their vision. That was what they drove to as a project organization. One team, break down the walls, reduce the barriers to communication. Selfish discipline. Interface management as a selfish discipline. And I quite like this. This was a bit of a twist I hadn't seen before. But this was basically, this is what I need, when can I have it? Rather than focusing on a milestone and all discussing it, it's no, I need these things to finish my job, to hit my goals that you tasked me with. A little bit of a cultural mindset or paradigm shift. They need to drive accountability. They need to make it clear around those scopes who's doing what when. And then visibility to see whether that was achieved, whether it was delayed, so the management team and or the owner operator could step in and support and help the different project participants. So tactically, very much bringing the organization, all the participants, all the stakeholders together. So how did we help with that? Everyone had access, obviously, with the usual security protocols, etc., etc. But everybody could be an observer. Again, visibility, being able to see what's going on. The CoreWorks toolset allowed us to show status, information, trends from the individual's perspective, the individual company or the individual interface coordinator, so they could see exactly who they needed to talk to and work with. KPIs, always a challenge, but the client team in this instance looked at it sensibly. It's got to be meaningful, it's got to be measurable, and it changes over time. So recognizing that the KPIs needed to be adjusted by project phase. And fundamentally, executive oversight. The executives, the stakeholders, the joint venture partners being able to see the status of interfaces on the project. Where are we? And when something goes red, how do we fix it? How do we help the different organizations that we've contracted with? Process. Standardize the process. There is one process, that's how we deal with interfaces. That doesn't say we can't adapt the deliverables or various components of that process, but be consistent. And I'm a firm believer in being consistently wrong so we can change, so I fully support that one. Early identification of interfaces. This was done in the feed phase. So critical priority, these are the big things we have to hit, we have to coordinate, we have to manage. In terms of driving those behaviors, interface management was a requirement in the tender. It was an evaluation criteria. What experience does the contractor have in this space? What experience does the key vendor have in this space? And then get it in the contract. It's something you have to do. You have to join the one team and be part of the team and collaborate using interface management. And this one I really liked, active feedback. They had quarterly offsites with all of the participants, the interface coordinators from the different contractors, etc. Regular surveys. Is interface management helping you to do your job? Is it helping you to delineate scope, etc.? So they actively solicited feedback and adjusted, course corrected as they went along. Because you can see below, full life cycle implementation. How do we help that? Well, we brought out of the box best practice. Over the years that we've been deploying interface management for owner operator, EPC contractor, automation contractors, etc., we bring an out of the box best practice process that we can configure to meet any specific requirements on individual projects. We bring the ability to have that scheduled integration so they could bulk import key milestones, key interface dates, or interface points at the start to facilitate that conversation around what we need to do when to meet that schedule milestone. Easy onboarding. Typically we get a group of contractors together and it's an hour meeting. And of that hour meeting, probably 45 minutes is spent talking about the project objectives, where they want to go, etc. Not point, click, how do I? Very easy to deploy and to bring the various parties together in using the tool set. And configurable. You know, at the end of the day, there's no point having a static, fixed, I can't do anything with it, I can't change anything. You know, we've got a lot of experience in supporting projects to make that tool set configurable to meet your needs, so it can be rapidly modified to meet what you need. The third leg that the project team addressed was full life cycle implementation. What did that mean? All project phases. We will use interface management throughout the project phase, from engineering through to construction, through to initial startup and handover. That generates the definition of hard and soft interfaces. And I'll talk to this a little bit more on the next ones. But basically, hard is your typical engineering design clarification. Please give me the center line and coordinates of that pipe so I can continue my engineering design. The soft interfaces were more when you start to get into the field phase, and we're talking about, I need to agree when we're going to do a witness inspection and test. I need to agree that you're going to do the termination of that cable by date X. We need to agree that you will provide me access through that interface corridor on date Y. So a lot of attention paid to those softer interfaces, especially in the execution phase, in the field. What I call pester power. They needed the ability to be able to see what was going on and to remind people what's due or overdue, to reinforce that accountability we talked about under that cultural shift above. And handover packages. The team were very diligent to include interface agreements made between the different parties and their status in handover packages between contractors and in handover to commissioning and other team members, so they knew exactly what the status was. And to facilitate that, they knew they needed access anywhere. Through all of the project phases, the team need to collaborate in a single space to avoid delays, miscommunication, etc. And what we brought to help facilitate that from that project lifecycle perspective was, again, configurable. I need to relate these things to engineering work packages, construction work packages, commissioning work packages, you know, that advanced work packaging type methodology. How do I relate these things? How do I see it from my perspective, from all the automation contractors' interfaces to all of the other contractors? This type of attributions required to be able to filter, sort, and make sense of the information as you go through the project lifecycle. That speaks to that classification. How do I label things? Yeah, how do I easily slice and dice to get a better understanding of where my bottlenecks or risks are starting to materialize? And part of that is having that notifications and alerts. And by using a centralized tool set, the team were able to be reminded, help, do something. Yeah, having that pester power. And again, by focusing rather than on spreadsheets and Excel, by using our single source centralized application, single source of truth. Everybody's looking at the same thing at the same time. Not miscommunication, not delays. So part of this was using CoreWorks as an input to every meeting. This is our automated minutes of meeting. Do you agree to? Yes. Is this closed? Yes or no? Yes, it is. Will you be there next Tuesday? Yes, I will. Yeah. And to facilitate that, we hosted and provided that real-time 24/7, 365 access to the toolset. So what does that mean? Where interfaces is that top 10 risk, what did CoreWorks help to do? Well, we think we helped to facilitate that one team. That was the project team's objective, to pull all the various collaborating parties together. And we provided a robust solution which was proven and was rapidly deployed to support the project team. And it was available 24/7, 365, and was adaptable to the project's needs as it grew, as it changed, and as they had to mitigate the various risks on the project. From the project's perspective, by using that disciplined approach to interface management and a common solution, they help to mitigate some of those inherent risks around interfaces and collaboration and teamwork. So, what I'm going to do now is walk through some specific examples to really highlight the benefits that the project saw as they went through using interface management and CoreWorks. So, contractor turnover. Always a high risk on any project. It materialized. The challenge the team had here was safety violations in the field, where they had to dismiss and then remobilize a new contractor. Luckily, the disciplined approach they'd migrated through engineering and into construction meant that they captured those soft interfaces. Who had committed to do what when, and whether or not those tasks or agreements or activities had been completed. What that gave the discovery team, because whenever you release a contractor, the project cannot do this in isolation, there's always a corporate involvement, allowed the discovery team to come in and say, okay, where were we when we said stop? And help them in that potential litigation management when you terminate a contractor. It also allowed them to bundle up the scope of work which was outstanding to support rapid tendering and remobilization of the new contractor. And when the contractor came on board, they used the interface register to familiarize and get them up to speed quickly. So here, stuff happens, as the expression goes, but from the project's perspective, they were in a position where they were able to rapidly transition through a very difficult phase and bring on board a new contractor to complete the work. And again, this feeds into that mitigating overall project risk. And here, interface management basically enhanced that contract management tendering process. Okay, early greenfield and brownfield operations. So anybody who's worked on a major capital project requiring infrastructure, we all know there's a lot of early startup of utilities and power to support switching on the lights on the runway so you can start bringing the people in to do the construction. In this case, the team had procedures and processes in place, all of the good standard business practices that we do. But very early on, there was an issue in handing over to the construction type operations group, where there was the potential for an LTI. It didn't happen, which was good. But recognizing the complexities they had in front of them and the number of actors and participants in the field, they said, you know what, we need something more. We need some additional stuff on top of our normal best practice. And this really drove that establishment of what I call the soft interfaces, confirming who's going to do what, when they're going to do it, what they're going to supply. So I will supply the scaffolding. You are going to reinstate the installation. Yeah. Here are the things I haven't finished when I hand it over to you. So the interface documentation, the status of agreements and those soft tasks, activities were captured and included in the handover binders go forward to add another layer of safety and security and reassurance between the various project participants. The project said that basically this contributed to really helping them achieve a very, very good record of safe turnover and of systems and tie-ins into that early operations, early provision to construction phase. Okay, critical milestones. we are all familiar with critical milestones, whether we be owner, operator, joint venture partner, fabricator, vendor, supplier. But in this case, field sequencing of the multiple contractors was the real challenge. So the big issue at the end of the day was with the large number of contractors and a limited level of schedule integration at I'll call it the level 4, level 5, that really detailed activities. For this milestone, to meet that critical milestone, they had 5 contractors in 1 geographical area and 1 week to complete the primary interface tie-ins to hand over that scope of work. Again, with that disciplined approach, they captured all the agreements and the interface points and said, okay, who's on first, who's on second, who's doing what, when. So the team, the various contractors, the one team could sit together, agree scope, execution timelines, coordination, and basically do I'll call it a shutdown, turnaround type level of detail planning. Again, end result, they hit that milestone by using interface management to further enhance and integrate the project team and the normal business practices or working practices. Okay. Environmental weather, the unknown unknown. There's always these. They end up on a risk register, and somehow we have to deal with it when they arise. In this case, the team had done a lot of preparation. They had evacuation plans. They had shutdown plans. They knew what they needed to do if and when this risk arose. In this case, it did. Multiple times, they lost multiple weeks on the schedule in different scope areas. Forest fires, flooding. And if any of you are aware of Alberta and the forest fires at Fort McMurray and the evacuation of a whole town, this is a big impact. What this basically allowed them to do with the use of interface management, again, it enhanced those procedures they had for stop work, demobilize, remobilize, because they captured what had been done up to that point of stop work. So now they knew what they had still to do, what agreements were open, what hadn't been done. So when the team remobilized, they could say, okay, what do we need to do immediately to maintain schedule? What's a secondary priority? We've got a bit more time. And what can we push off and maybe put onto the next team coming behind me? So really what this allowed them to do when that risk materialized was effectively to recover and prioritize, again, to stay on schedule. So again, here another example where interface management enhanced current business processes, practices, and procedures and created additional value and benefit for the project team. So let's talk about a real unknown unknown. I'm sure a lot of the audience today has lived through the market impact of 2014 and the price of oil. And I'm sure we've all lived through the corporate, okay, what do we do now? We've got projects in flight. They're major capital investments. How do we course correct? How do we adjust? What do we need to do? And basically the project management team were put under the cost microscope. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? And what value does it add? And what can you stop doing and reduce cost? And really as a result of interface management in feed, interface management in engineering, interface management in fabrication and early construction site activities, the team were able to demonstrate the value add of interface management and the use of the CoreWorks toolset to facilitate that. And they could see the low cost and exceptionally high value that this delivered to the project team. So it's very rare that in the middle of a project you have to go back and do that self-examination. Are we doing the right things and should we keep doing it? But in this point, and this was only came out in a conversation with our client a couple of weeks ago when they said, yeah, we have to go through this and justify everything. Halfway through the project, they actually had to look at that ROI, that return on investment that they made to date in interface management and the CoreWorks toolkit. And by doing that, they could demonstrate to their joint venture partners, their stakeholders, their corporate governance organization, that this works and it added value, and we're going to keep doing it. Okay, at this stage, I'd like to pass back to Kelly. And I know I've gone through this relatively quickly, but she's going to do a little bit of a wrap up, and then we're going to open it up for questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephen. I think you did a great job of walking us through the challenges this project faced and how they were able to mitigate some of those risks. I actually had the pleasure of working on this project and listening to some of your stories. One thing that really stands out to me is their one-team approach. The project was very successful. They had a very strong interface team leading the way, and they were very successful in achieving that goal. We were also included in that one team. They felt that it was very important to have that partnership with us, and we definitely agreed. And the benefits there was that we attended a lot of those quarterly offsite meetings. We were able to directly hear direct feedback from the contractors and the users that were managing their interfaces. And then we were able to incorporate that feedback back into the product. And this has really had a huge impact, I think, on everybody that was involved in that project. The contractors felt that they were being heard, that their feedback was valued, and that they were truly a part of the team. Everybody was in it together, and everybody truly wanted this project to succeed. It was really very much a success all around. So I want to just sort of recap some of those 4 key opportunities that we talked about that projects can capitalize on when executing on a project and managing risk related to interfaces. We talked about scope delineation, and Stephen shared some of the stories around how they were able to mitigate the risk of contractor turnover by having that very disciplined approach to managing interfaces and that interface register that was handed over to the discovery team. We also talked about and heard how they transitioned from engineering into construction, and again, being able to use that interface register to have predefined interfaces for the construction contractors as they came on board. Improve accountability. This team really capitalized on this in spades. That one-team approach was very successful. They had the collaboration and visibility of interface ownership, and they really developed that sense of shared ownership around interfaces. Stephen talked about the soft interfaces and how they were able to use interface management to more effectively manage their soft interfaces. And senior management KPI is certainly very important, and this project had that unique KPI of measuring and monitoring attendance at projects, which just goes to show the value and importance that they placed on regular meetings and collaboration. Manage growth, certainly very important, and I contribute a lot of that success is, again, to their disciplined approach of using that single central register. They really enabled the communication and collaboration of all their globally dispersed contractors. They were able to access that single central register and get up to date and up to speed and share information. And the project team benefited from that as well. They had those early indicators of potential issues. They also facilitated their regular meetings using the tool. They had real-time updates to interfaces as they progressed and as they met on a regular basis. And the last opportunity area here is to reduce rework, and this project certainly was able to do that. They had to mitigate some very serious challenges that they had on the project, the environmental risks, and they were able to get back on track quite quickly. Again, mitigating the impact that the contractor turnover may have had for them. The fact that contractor was able to get up to speed quite quickly by using the online interface register and viewing the historical interfaces and agreements and conversations that had taken place ensured that they were able to get up to speed quite quickly and avoiding, potential delays in their schedule or, items that might have resulted in rework. So that's all we have for today. It brings our case study to a close. But I want to leave you with a final project scorecard. So we do have some time left for questions. I'm going to give everybody a minute if they'd like to enter any additional questions, and also give Stephen a minute to review them. While we are doing that, I did want to mention some options for people if they want to get more information on interface management. You can always go to our website at coreworks.com, but you can also come and chat with Stephen and I in person if you're going to attend the Downstream conference this year. We will be in booth D14, and Stephen will be participating on a project execution panel, as Carla mentioned at the beginning of our presentation. And for those that really want to take a deeper dive into interface management, learn more about the practice, look at more case studies, and look at how they could implement interface management on their projects, we are running 2 interface management workshops in Houston, one on June 13th and one on June 25th. So if you would like more information on those, let me know. I'm happy to send you some more details.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Thank you very much, Kelly, for sharing some really great insights and food for thought. Yeah, unfortunately, we are coming to the end of the session, so we do have to wrap up. Couple of things I wanted to mention. So we have had a lot of questions come in that haven't been addressed simply because of the time frame. But we will put them to Kelly and Stephen after the webinar finishes, and we'll be able to address those questions and send some answers to you guys. So not to worry on that front. I've also been getting loads of emails about presentations and the audio being available after the webinar finishes. Yes, you will all be sent an email within the next couple of days, hopefully tomorrow, with access to the full audio replay and the slides that were shared with you today. That's it from me. Just another thank you again for all tuning into the petrochemical webinar, and thank you to our partners, CoreWorks. Thanks very much. Have a great day ahead. Bye-bye.